Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Fowler Industries Vanta 9. Just look at those lines. This is, I mean, just right off the bat, this is a beautiful gun. And I'll be honest with you, what got my attention to do a review on the Vanta 9 was just poking around Instagram, and the gun's overall aesthetics caught my eye, and I was like, huh, okay. And as I started looking at it, which didn't take long, and zooming in on the pictures and whatnot, I got an idea that like some of those aesthetics are actually very functional. Clearly we got our forward cocking serrations, things like that, but they did something very interesting down here on the frame that I haven't seen from too many, if any, double stack 1911, 2011, whatever your preferred terminology is, makers. And that's this little checkered bit right here, which provides a great friction point for my support side thumb. And I'm like, wow, these guys must be shooters. So I was like, let me go ahead and order one of these, because I'd like to get another 2011 in the lineup. As you know, as you've been following the channel for a while, I've been going through pretty much all, at least brands, if not every model of 2011s that are out there doing reviews, trying to find the one that I love the most, or or the best one made subjectively, to my opinion. One thing about Fowler, they've been around for quite some time, and they're known for quality aftermarket work on Glocks. But just because somebody makes a good Glock or good aftermarket parts or accessories or customization for Glock does not mean they're going to be able to handle doing a 2011. It was immediately apparent to me when I got the gun out of the box and I started messing with it. I went ahead and ordered it. Didn't take long at all to come in. I had really good communications from Fowler, which I definitely appreciated. And the gun showed up, and right out of the box, I just get that, it's that unquantifiable, those esoteric, intangible synapses connecting and firing and recognizing that there's some degree of craftsmanship that goes into the gun immediately before even shooting it. And then once you start handling it and working it and testing out the controls and doing my normal boring function checks for safety that I never record because, well, not always never record. I record if there's anything weird about the gun. It became apparent that the gun, at least before firing, was very well fit. And I'm not going to use that very subjective term of fit and finish. There was a degree of precision in the mechanical operation of the firearm, which provided a positive feel, but there was very little, if any, unnecessary friction in the controls or manipulation of the gun, which is what some people try to mean when they say fit and finish, but they don't really expound on what exactly particular parts you're talking about. And when it comes to the controls of a firearm, there's always something I don't like, or something I wish was a little crisper, a little cleaner, or had a little less resistance. One issue I've had with 2011s in the past, some other models, has been the safety, especially for me being a left-handed shooter. I need an ambi. And needing an ambi, usually the selector that's on the right side for my left-hand thumb, is an afterthought. Some guns are better than others. This gun feels like, even though it has ambi safety, it feels like it was set up for a left-handed shooter. And I really appreciate that. What are you getting, before we even get into the review, what are you getting when you buy a Fowler Vanta 9? Some of the obvious features: slide lightning, basically, you know, the machining work that's adding surface area, or adding surface area for manipulations, is also reducing the weight, overall weight of the slide. You get the enhanced cocking serrations, front and rear, of course. They have some micro serrations on the front and rear, which may serve as an additional purchase point. And I definitely notice, I appreciate that increased contact point, at least. Fowler hand fits the slide to the frame, which is something I would definitely expect from a gun that costs as much as this. And they have a proprietary optic cut plate with a lower 1/3 co-witness rear sight, so their iron sights sit very low in the window depending on which optic you go with. I went with a Holosun 508 for the review process because I know it's going to be a durable optic, and because it's a proprietary optic system, I have to test the optic system while I'm testing the gun. Got to cover all the bases, right? So I'm going to go ahead and of course drop this thing, as I'm sure some people are literally tuned in only for that. As I already kind of pointed out, it's got ambi selectors, which can be sized differently, either by preference or by order from Fowler. The barrel is a Barstow precision fluted match, and it's a bull barrel, 5-inch in length. 7075 aluminum grip module with texturing. And Fowler's own, they call it the zero trigger for the V9, which is a flat face profile, which is definitely what you want for a 2011. Some people would argue that the curved triggers are cool too. I like flat because it's a as straight as possible, even pull to the rear of the operation that you get from the 1911 style trigger. Uses the Dawson toolless guide rod system, light and hander with what they call grenade checkering, and of course it's got a light rail. The other controls, of course, aren't ambi, which you don't really see on 2011, so that's not a huge departure. Getting into the review, first 500 rounds, got it zeroed. Zeroing was a breeze. I don't really knock or celebrate a gun that zeroes quickly, because that's all based on the optic to the firearm interface. One thing I did notice during my zero process is those suppressor height sights, even if they sit a little lower, they were more point of aim, point of impact right around 15, which I actually do appreciate. And that's somewhat common with suppressor height sights, and this is something a lot of people don't talk about, or some people don't talk about, I should say, is what is the point of aim, point of impact, the sights. And some people are going to be slaving their red dot off those sights for at least a starting point for the zero, as they should, and the zeroed edition there. I actually found on this gun, which is surprising to me, that the red dot and the iron sight profile, if I were to view them together, is very close, which kind of speaks to how they're bringing those sights down as low as possible, with the optics are going to be, that this footprint is going to accept. So I got the first 500 rounds in, just working the gun through its paces, really getting a feel for it. It comes lubed up, ready to go from the factory. I took it down to get a look at all the parts, then reassembled it, did my functions and safeties check, got it to the range, and just started burning through that first 500 rounds, but not actually the burn down. After zeroing process, the gun is incredibly smooth. The additional weight, of course, this is one of the things that's very appealing about 2011s, because they're heavier. The recoil tends to be more manageable. Again, this goes back to that argument, oh, you know, it's 9mm, you should be able to handle the recoil anyway, yuck. Yeah, but again, no recoil is better than recoil. It would definitely, I think anybody can agree that having no recoil would make shooting way easier. That's kind of the goal. So anything a gun can do, either OEM or aftermarket parts, to give me no recoil is something I'm definitely going to pursue, because I've been shooting for 20 years now. I shoot 3, 4, 5, sometimes more 1,000 rounds a month. I'm tired of recoil. I'm done with recoil. It's a very abusive relationship, literally. So the additional weight is something I appreciate, and that's why 2011s appeal to me, because with the additional weight and the overall function, full-size frame, 5-inch guns, I don't have to seek out porting or comping necessarily to get the same degree, small degree, of performance differences versus a similar length gun in a different configuration or polymer or whatever. But the controls are smooth, the trigger is clean, very little take up, very little reset. I like the trigger a lot. Not only the aesthetics of the trigger, I think the trigger is just a really good looking trigger, which is completely irrelevant to the function of the gun, but I do appreciate those small little aesthetic thoughts that go into the overall design, because aesthetics is part of firearms, and if you disagree with that, then, well, you haven't been on the internet very long. Because people sometimes will literally not buy a product because they don't like the way it looks. Think about the Aimpoint Acro. An excellent optic, people don't like the way it looks, so they're like, oh, I'm going to buy something that looks cooler. Okay. And I get that, but something has to have function before it has form. That's just my opinion, and I appreciate that at least in the initial 500 rounds, the Vanta 9 was performing well and looking great. Then, of course, we get to the burn down, which is 500 rounds as quickly as possible to see if that increased rate of fire will cause any issues that I wouldn't notice with the same round count over a longer period of time. So 45 minutes versus 45 hours, days, weeks, months, you know, the normal boilerplate. Here's your burn down. As I was kind of expecting, no issues. The gun did pick up heat a little bit more, but because it's all metal, it's not something that's super surprising and not something I haven't seen from other 2011s. Let's be honest, most people are not going to do 500 rounds in that short a period of time, because outside of a burn down, I can't think of any time you'd shoot that many rounds through a handgun constructively. I guess if you're shooting mag dumps into trash. But aside from that, it's purely, well, subjective science, if that's such a thing. Interesting thing happened in the last 1,000 rounds. I went and took a Frank Proctor class. I try to get as many classes as I can a year, even though I am an instructor. That's my primary business. For those of you that don't know, YouTube is a hobby. This is not my job. I don't make any money off of it. I teach for a living. And I try to take as many classes as possible. I know there's that old trope or cliche, always a student, but I enjoy taking classes. And I hadn't taken a performance or a competition-based class in a very long time. And I know Frank through John Dufresne, got to meet him, got to talk to him a few times, and I was like, I really like the way this guy does things, so let me go ahead and step outside, not necessarily my comfort zone, but a little bit. Let me take a class where I have literally no expectations of what's going to happen, because I've seen what Frank teaches, and I've heard Frank talk, and I've seen Frank shoot, but I didn't know his process and his application as an instructor. So I jumped in the class for 2 days and I took the Vanta 9 with me, managed another almost 300 rounds during the class process of that last 1,000 in the review process, running it through the course, his various stages, how he sets things up. Not only did the gun meet the expectations of me, the shooter, being able to perform to the standards that were set in the class, but sometimes things that happen on the range are fine, and then you take a gun and actually need it to perform on demand and it won't. This was definitely not the case. The Vanta 9 did everything I asked of it and more, providing a great degree of accuracy, and it was able to meet the standards of which I needed the gun to meet. Of course, I was the shooting factor involved, but the firearm needed to perform as well. I don't think enough can be said, that last 1,000 rounds, enough can really be said about the forethought that went into the potential customers for this gun. Yes, it is expensive. 2011s are expensive. Get over it. Is it overpriced? Is it too expensive? In my opinion, it's not. And I think my opinion is pretty well qualified, considering I have owned pretty much all the popular 2011s at this point, and I've decided which ones I'm going to keep and which ones I'm going to get rid of based on how I feel subjectively and objectively about their price points, their features, their performance. The Vanta 9 performs very, very well. Not only does it perform very, very well, it performs very, very well in an almost boring sense of reliability that I have come to expect from certain tiers of firearms. I don't actually include 2011s in that tier, even though there are some good ones. As a design overall, there are plenty of guns that don't perform as they should, or they are just too finicky for me. Do you need a 2011? Well, the video is not about that. The video is about how good, if not good at all, is the Vanta 9 according to Aaron Cowan's opinion, and you can take that for exactly what it's worth. I like this gun a lot. Aesthetically, of course, talked about that. But the overall function and the amalgamation and relationships of both what is subjective and objectively appealing about the firearm result in a gun that I just really appreciate, and I'm glad that it exists. There's always those unquantifiable little things that you can't really point to and identify that say, you know, why you were so positive about something. And we're, of course, not finished with the review, but I think just based on where we're at right now, you can probably get the idea that the gun performed well, and it did. But there's always that one final thing, and that's the overall durability of the gun. I shot 2,000 rounds through it, and I did it in a pretty short period of time, even though this video, you're probably seeing it much longer after the review is finished, because there's a queue of videos lined up. But I knocked out that 2,000 rounds in right around a month, which is actually slow. Had a bunch of classes to teach, didn't have time to get on the range and do filming. In that time, I had enough opportunity to do, you know, the normal review process, and that includes the drop testing. The only reason I'm really doing drop testing on this gun is because they have, like I said earlier in the video, they have that proprietary optic mounting system. So here's a 5-round group I fired for 0 purposes prior to the first drop. This is actually just filming right after I finished zeroing, confirming the 0 was done. This is 25 yards, 5 rounds, 124 grain gold dot. I think we can agree the Vanta 9 is an accurate gun. We can just go ahead and check that box. We're done there. And that's one thing I definitely appreciated throughout the process and just shooting the gun, is the inherent accuracy that the gun was capable of. But the elephant in the room is the optic plate any good? It's a proprietary iron sight system, proprietary plate design, and that can give some people, myself included, pause, because I've broken plenty of proprietary plate designs. Plenty of proprietary plate designs. So I did a drop test every 500 rounds. Well, here's your drops. Then, of course, we have a 5-round group fired after the final drop test at the same zero distance, 25 yards, on the same target, using 124 grain gold dot. What we're looking for here is, did the gun maintain zero? I would call that return to zero, and also a really good demonstration of accuracy after the 2,000 rounds. Generally, in the review process, I don't clean guns. I try not to. I initially lubricate them if they need it, and then we just go. Some people over clean their guns. I used to be one of those people, because when I was in the Army, we cleaned guns just to kill time, because there weren't people to, well, you know what I mean. So, my final opinion, I think you guys kind of got my feeling for it. I like this gun a lot. I'm definitely going to be keeping this, and I'm probably going to be putting it in the rotation of guns that I use kind of frequently. I'm pretty boring when it comes to firearms. I'm not much of a collector. I generally buy things for review purposes, and then I usually end up getting rid of them. In fact, every 6 months I open the safes and I audit what I have, and if I haven't used it since the last time I did an audit, I generally get rid of it, which makes some people very, very happy, because they get pretty decent deals on firearms. Especially, I can't sell like, hey, there's video proof of what I did to this thing, so I'm going to give you a discount. This is definitely one I'm going to be putting in my small rotation of guns that I use for personal practice and for teaching. Could you carry this thing? There are some, like for those LE guys out there, there are some departments that authorize 2011s. You should definitely look at putting this one on the list. It's going to be a little bit more expensive than the more popular LE 2011s that you're seeing, double stack 1911s, whatever you want to call them. For concealed carry, I mean, it's a big gun. It doesn't mean you can't do it. I mean, I carry a full-size gun, so really the issue would only be weight, I think, for most people. Polymer guns just are lighter, but they don't have the degree of precision that you're necessarily going to get from something like this, and that may be something you appreciate. Or if you're just really a big fan of the 1911 operating system, but you want more than 8 rounds of I hope this works, go ahead and reach for a Fowler Vanta 9. I'm Eric Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.